Good evening and welcome to the second meeting of the City of Laurel Redistricting and Ward Boundary Advisory Committee. This meeting is being held via Zoom and was published on the city calendar beginning last week. And a notice went out just yesterday from communications regarding this meeting, which will include a public hearing. Ms. Quillen, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Wilson?
I'm here.
Mr. Smith?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Mr. Clary?
Here.
Ms. Whitley?
I'm here.
Chairwoman Bettman?
Here.
You have a quorum, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. I would like to state in advance that we expect this meeting to last well less than 1 hour. However, in the event that we exceed 7 p.m., there is a Board of Elections Supervisor meeting, and I would like to note that Ms. Rhonda Whitley will need to leave to participate on that. And also, I believe Ms. Kim Rao will also need to leave for that. But as I said, I believe we will move through this meeting in enough time to have our discussion and all. Before moving on, I'd like to ask Ms. Whitley to please introduce herself and welcome her. She was unable to join us on the first call, and we're glad to have a full committee this week.
Thank you, Mitzi. I'm Rhonda Whitley. Happy to be a part of this effort. I am the co-chair for this effort and just looking forward to getting to work. And again, my apologies on the last meeting.
She's already caught up with us, though. Moving on to agenda item 2, the approval of the minutes. The minutes were of the first meeting, Tuesday, March 3rd, were sent to all of us via email. If there are no corrections or comments, I'll entertain a motion.
A motion to approve the minutes from, what was it, the March 3rd? March 3rd.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Do I have a second? Thank you, Rick. Mr. Wilson. Ms. Quillen, if you'll call the roll.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Clary?
Yeah.
Ms. Whitley? You can
Yes.
abstain. I'll put you down as abstain since you were absent. Chairwoman Bettman?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3. I just simply have a note there for committee updates. I just wanted to note for the public that may be joining us this evening that at the first meeting we talked about the 2010 census and some of the results from that. And I just wanted to let everyone know that the committee received that information. And just for the public's note, the 2010 census, the City of Laurel population was 25,115, with the Ward 1 being 10,654 and Ward 2 being 14,461. A committee similar to our committee was put together by the mayor and city council, and they made a resolution to the city council, to the mayor and council, charter resolution number 159, which was passed on September 24th of 2012. And in that, the resolution, the committee decided to tweak the boundaries, the existing boundaries, and brought the numbers closer together. And at the end of that, the Ward 1 boundaries included a population of 12,488, and the Ward 2 a population of 12,627. So the committee has received this resolution, reviewed it as information. Before moving on to the public hearing, I just wanted to check, does any committee member have any other further updates on either the last meeting or prior to us going into the public hearing We'll have full discussion after. Okay, hearing none. Brooke, if you could go to the next slide, please. So prior to, like I said, I'm getting ready to open the public hearing. Just wanted, for those that may be joining for the first time, this is the current ward populations. And again, this map with the blue and the orange on it is the result of the committee that was formed in 2012 following the 2010 census numbers. In the 2020 census numbers, Ward 1 has a population of 13,614, and Ward 2 a population of 16,446. The percentage breakdowns of population, and just a reminder, this is total population. This is not only voting age people. This is the entire population in these wards. So Ward 1 currently has 45.3% of the population. Ward 2, 54.7%, for a total population of 30,060. So a difference of 9.4 percentage points in terms of a difference there. So if we could go to the next slide, please. I would like to open the public hearing at 6:06 p.m. And for anyone watching and public that may be on, the discussion the committee had the last time was that there are 4 options in front of us, not maps, 4 options. One is to make no change to the existing ward boundaries and leave the numbers as they are. Number 2 is to increase the boundary of existing Ward 1 to more closely balance the population and thereby reducing the number in the current Ward 2. Number 3 is we could recommend changing boundaries to both wards. And number 4, change the number of wards. So I would ask the public to let us know if you have a preference of any of the 4 and why, and if you are against any of the 4, let us also know that. Ms. Crary, are you on the line? Okay. Donna Crary, address 402 Montrose Avenue, Laurel, Maryland, submitted the following written comments. I wish to provide written comments at this time. I did not receive notice of the first meeting, and this meeting notice was received less than 24 hours ago. Was notice sent out? Consequently, I have another meeting out of the office planned. I will reach out to my that's not what she wrote. I will reach out to my council representatives. I do not wish to be moved to Ward 1. I reside in Ward 2 and have represented Ward 2 as a council member. They have very different issues and demography. The population may show differently due to the apartment complexes located in Ward 2, as opposed to the single-family homes located in Ward 1. That is to say, Ward 2 is higher in population. Either keep the wards the same or create a 3rd ward and incorporate the new areas of the city, which appear to be the future of Laurel's growth, thereby solving new issues relevant to that section of the city. I hope to appear at the meeting to address these issues, but do not know of my meeting end time. This meeting was also moved up an hour from the first meeting. And that concludes her written statement to the committee. We will keep an eye on if she is able to join us before we close the public hearing. But we have let her know that today's meeting will not be the last meeting. Even if we come to consensus this evening, there would be a 3rd meeting for input on our proposal. So with that, I believe we had a couple other people that requested the phone number for the Zoom to listen. And I would invite, is there anyone that would now like to speak during this public hearing? Hearing no one, I will close the public hearing at 6:10 PM. Brooke, if you could go to the next slide, please. So this is the same, whoops, sorry, back one. There you go. This is the same slide that was on the screen just a minute ago, except the title changing to committee discussion and decision. And what I'd like to do here is start just from the top to see if there is a consensus among the committee going down on these options. So the first is, we've stated the difference in the numbers, a 9-point difference. Is there any overwhelming sentiment? Does someone want to speak strongly for no change to the existing ward boundaries? So let me ask, so Ms. Whitley, you believe that changes are required, or that we should be recommending some change?
I'm actually just coming off mute. I
Okay.
don't know if you saw my facial expression or something,
Oh.
but well, I need to hear more discussion on all, because I think there is probably some value to exploring and increasing it, increasing by 1 ward to reflect the newer areas within the city. Initially, my thoughts were to no changes, but I'm really interested in hearing more from Donna McCrary on that idea.
Thank you.
Especially
Rick?
since, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
especially since that demographic may have a whole different set of concerns and issues and items needing to be addressed. So I don't know.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Rick? On the on the no change,
I'm sorry, did you ask me, Mitch?
yes.
Well, I could live with no change. I prefer probably to tweak it, but let me just say, I get Donna's issues about, we don't make policy in the city at the ward boundary. So the fact that this neighborhood is a little different than that neighborhood, or this ward is a little different than that ward, it's just not a factor in my mind because of the way the city solves problems. Nothing happens. The only thing that the ward tells you is where do you go vote and where do you have to live to represent a ward. So there's really no difference in which ward you're in. I mean, I get Donna's point of view. It'll move her potentially, if we do a tweak, it'll move her from Ward 2 to Ward 1. But the only thing that's going to change is where does she go to vote. We're not like Chicago or New York or a big city where there's actual policy and services being provided at the ward boundary. We don't do that. Our wards have no meaning other than where do you have to live, where do you get to vote, and where do you have to live to run for council. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Yes, ma'am. So far as the no change to existing ward boundaries, I do believe there should be changes. So the question, if I feel like number 1 would be, appropriate, I would say no. I believe that changes is needed. But the whole conversation that she did bring up some topics that during the hearing and the letter that you read around the new Laurel sections. So the words are set up. I mean, you might not know the exact line, but I know on the other side of 198, for the most part, that's Ward 1. And, for the most part on the other side is Ward 2. So there's an even almost kind of division for the most part. There are exceptions, I understand that. So it's kind of easy to understand which ward is which. I guess the question is, where is the quote unquote new Laurel sections? Because based on my understanding of Laurel, there's few of them. and they're not all necessarily together. So I'm not really sure how a third or even fourth ward would play into that clear separation. And also, I do understand from a city perspective, when different legislations come out and policies and things that are done from the council and the mayor's level, we speak to one Laurel, but there are definitely interests within the particular wards that should be thought of and taken account to why there should be some separation because of interest. And then she also did bring up a good point that I didn't even think of, is I believe Ward 2 has a higher concentration potentially of apartments, which brings other, I wouldn't say challenges, but is unique, right, to maybe one side of Ward 2 versus the other. But I think we just need to take all those things into consideration. So I would definitely go against the no change to existing boundaries, that there should be a change.
Thank you. Mr. Clary.
Yeah, I was just listening in. I would at first I would be really for number one, no change. I think the concern would be the changing of voting locations, and I think that may be a challenge for a lot of folks reporting to the or trying to vote when it comes down to it or comes time to vote. I think I guess Ms. McCreary did bring up some points, and I also would be interested in hearing, but the boundaries currently between wards 1 and 2, if there were any changes, I would kind of go towards more geographical boundaries, such as the main roads, which may throw in a little bit of changes to the existing, but I can, like I said, at this point, I'm more leaning towards no change to the existing boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you. I too was leaning towards either no change to existing boundaries or increasing the boundaries of existing Ward 1. And my thoughts on that, and again, we are not to use the projected numbers for what will be coming over off of Conti Road, though we as a city and all members of the city know that the developments that have been approved and are under development potentially can project another 5 to even 10,000 people. So the reason I had pretty much taken off change the number of wards at this point is if we did anything to create a third ward, I think now it would just completely have to be blown up in 10 years, because whatever we did based on current numbers now would throw everything so far out for coming in 10 years. So I too was kind of looking at either the no change to existing boundaries, because of looking also at the number of voters that turned out and the ability to, to handle both of the numbers. And with the early voting, people were able to go from either ward to City Hall. So, so let's move on to increasing the boundary of existing Ward 1, taking into account what Ms. Crary said. She was saying to leave that alone. We had 2 potential samples. Brooke, could you put up sample 1, please? Okay, so yes, this one. If looking at kind of the blue over that's going across the top of 198, if you go to the, I guess, the northwest, and you see the double line there between the blue and the far left, below that is kind of it's almost an inverted heart shape. That section right there is west of Van Dusen and runs south to Cherry Lane. That section is basically a clean slice to what I believe both Roy and Oris both were saying about major roads. That section right there is, for those that are familiar with community names, Arbory, it's both North and South Arbory, just down to Cherry Lane. So from a communication standpoint, this change here is kind of a concise slice. What it does in terms of numbers, it doesn't completely even the numbers up, but it actually puts Ward 1 slightly larger than Ward 2, and the percentages in looking at this sample put it 52% for Ward 1 and 48% in Ward 2. And as we know, Ward 2, like I say, is growing, not necessarily changing it. So in terms of talking about a tweak, now again, knowing Miss Crary's address and her statement, this would not impact her. It would just take that triangle to the left there and pretty much even that up. So,
Mitzi, I have a
Yes.
question. I'm sorry. So that's Arbory North and South. What would that look like? What is there an appetite? I don't know, I don't want to go too far ahead, but would there be an appetite, or what would be the pain or heartache, if you will, of splitting Arbory North and Arbory South?
oh, no. So are you able to see the screen?
Yeah, because that's
Okay,
South.
so no. You raise a very, very good point. And Rick raised this in the first meeting. What we don't want to do is split neighborhoods and split homeowner associations. So no, if you're looking at the triangle, it includes from that kind of the point of the top right triangle is there at Van Dusen and 198. So you have North Arbory, then come down, you're still in the blue, you have South Arbory. Come down a little bit farther and you've got that circle that goes off right before you hit the traffic light at Cherry Lane. You see what I'm saying? So it does not split that neighborhood. It takes that whole entire section. So from a communication standpoint, literally, communications could talk just into Arbory and right there into that neighborhood and across from the fire department. So it's a specific slice of Laurel, not taking 8th Street, but not 9th Street, not taking 12th Street, but not 11th Street, like that. So that's what this one does. Does that make sense? And to your point, it does not split neighborhoods. Roy, how about you? For looking at this map.
Yeah, I mean, it looks pretty clean just looking at it. I know they're also including the townhouse and single family communities that's right there off of Cherry, past the firehouse on the right. So it's gonna capture that too, right? Off to your right on Cherry.
That is correct.
Yeah.
But it doesn't go into any of the Wellington, it doesn't split because Wellington, as you've got the 4 separate, doesn't come across Cherry Lane into any of that, and it doesn't split any homeowners association.
Yep. Okay.
Rick, any comments on this one?
No, I like this. I think that neighborhood you're talking about is Cherrywood
Correct.
up there. So all of that, you could put one of those signs up, one of those trailer signs and say, you get to vote here. And it would catch all those folks in that one swath of Van Dusen. So I think that's a pretty elegant fix. I like this one a lot.
Mr. Clary.
Yeah, I think this would be doable. Like I said, we just if you can, stand the heartache of having some people change wards to vote and not sure of a sign to do, but I think you'll be doing some additional publicizing of this area that would change wards. So, but yeah, this would be doable as far as the numbers.
That is correct. And in the resolution that we received from 2012, they had some very specific requirements, to your point about how long notices were put out, how many times they were published in papers, and of course we'll be doing a lot more online. And as Rick said, you could put up signs or notices there. So now if we could switch to sample 2.
Roy's hand is up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Roy. Thank you, Rhonda.
Thank you. Let us have a quick question. So at what point in time will we be able to talk with, I guess, the mayor and city council? Now they're all men, but men, what their thoughts on making any changes? Because I know you make changes, whenever you make changes, it has an impact on them and who they represent, and understanding their take or their opinion on these changes and how that impacts how they're supporting the city now and into the future. I was just curious
That is an outstanding question, and I was very hopeful because they were part of the resolution that created our committee. We heard from the mayor just as a greeting in our first meeting, and they were all invited to participate this evening or to submit written. So I believe the way that it would happen now is that we as a committee, hearing from the public, and again, we will have an opportunity to hear from the public, our role is to come up with a recommendation or multiple recommendations, options to present to the council, and then they will discuss amongst themselves based on our recommendation and input whether they will go forward. Now in 2012, based on the committee's recommendation, the mayor and city council adopted that. It's my understanding, and Kim may have better information, I think prior to that, at least one committee recommended changes and the mayor and city council rejected that. As a reminder, part of our duties, we are an advisory committee. So we're just going to present our thoughts and they will make that final decision. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we could go to sample 2. And again, this is one where this was another sample of just trying to even up the numbers. Sample 2 actually evens up the numbers to a 50-50 split. However, what you'll notice is, so that far left now went back to orange, and you can't really tell because the blue just started creeping a little southwest, and that's along street lines. So to the question of, is that easy for communication? Again, I'll speak first on this one. I would say no, because you've got in that neighborhood some in and some out. This one does move the 400 block of Montrose, to which Ms. Crary spoke. It does move that. But I just wanted to put that up to show that we had 2 kind of existing options. One for easy communication and the numbers, and this one. Is there anyone that thinks we should consider this one? Roy, do you think there's any reason to consider this one?
I mean, just based on prior comments, breaking up communities causes definitely confusion. So I would definitely want to limit that. And according to what you just said, that this would potentially split up some communities.
Right.
So if that's the case, then I would not. I mean, it's a great mix, Ward 1, Ward 2, far as numbers, but splitting communities, I wouldn't want to do that.
Right. Rhonda?
Sorry. I agree. And I'm also putting on my Board of Election Supervisors hat when I, it's unfortunate the number of folks that show up to vote and they don't know which ward they're in. They don't, and so this would require, not that we couldn't pull it off, but a very robust education campaign, right? And I just don't know that there's enough time for that. And I'm just putting that hat on.
Yep.
But as a resident, I would not want to see community split. I don't know. I would not recommend this.
Thank you. Mr. Clary?
Yeah, likewise. I wouldn't recommend this one, as that kind of road goes through that neighborhood, or several. The same neighborhood would be split, so I wouldn't.
Rick?
I'd stay away.
No, the other one's much better. Thank you.
Okay. So just quickly, based on what we have said, and I just want to make sure, if you'll put up sample 3 for a section, for this one was just moving to major roads, and it threw the numbers way far out. So if we thought the numbers were starting to get too wide, I don't think there's any reason, again, that this one meets any at this point. Go on to sample 4. This, Rhonda, maybe I'll ask you to comment first. This is where, again, from a communication standpoint, no, I'm sorry, 4, the numbers are so far off. That was just an example. Let's go to 5. If we were to consider changes to both wards, if we said, no, we just want to start changing the whole city around, this is what it might look like along major roads. But again, Rhonda, I think we come into your communication issue and then knowing what we're coming. I see you shaking your head. Go ahead, please.
I'm shaking my head that I would not support this one. It's too much neighborhood creep for me, and it will cause more confusion.
Thank you. Is there anyone that would even want to discuss this one any further? I didn't think so. And sample 6, I think is the same thing to what, and this one's even worse to what Rhonda was saying. It's neighborhood creep and then cutting some out to balance those numbers. So if we could go all the way back to sample 2. Okay. Let's see. Now, before I do that, Rhonda, you did say you wanted to talk a little bit about going to 3 wards. Do you want to have that discussion after looking at, sample 1, I'm sorry, with the discussion of what we know is coming in the 10 years? Would you want to kind of really advocate? Again, we want to hear everybody's position. Advocate for going to 3 wards at this point?
I wouldn't advocate per se, but I really would have loved to hear more from Donna tonight on this. I mean, yes, she sent in her written thoughts, but I'm sure there are nuances that we're not capable of hearing right now. And so not advocating, but I'd really love to hear more of her thoughts. And Rick, to your point, I understand as under the current composition, policy is not made up per ward, but there's nothing that couldn't change that. And to Roy's counterpoint to that, there are times when a voice from those wards need to be represented, at the council level and at the city level, at the policy level. So not advocating, I just need to hear more from her.
Okay. And we have absolutely also invited her, again, if we come to a consensus this evening of how we would like staff to write up a potential resolution, we would have that turned around, put on the website, get public notice out that the committee has made the following recommendations, invite the people to come to the public hearing. Hopefully we would get more comment on our proposal. Then after we hear from the public, we would then take a vote. So we will have another option. Mr. Smith, would you like any further discussion on 3 wards at this point?
I mean, yeah, no, I'm open to hearing about it. And I know you all have probably greater insight into possible future growth than I do. Only reference I have is driving around and seeing stakes in the ground. So I would defer to you all and from a more experience and exposure perspective, and as well as anybody else's comments. So I'm open to it. I'm not against it, but I just don't have all the information.
Thank you. Rick?
No, I don't have anything to add. I mean, when I've seen the city go from 12,000 people and, 2 wards with 4 councilmen. And now we're at 30,000 people with the same number of councilmen. I think we're probably at the limit of, to keep it fair, the next census, probably if the development happens the way we have planned, will be at 40,000 people. At that point, I think it would make sense to consider adding, 1 or 2 more council people, just so that everybody has access, has a voice and, a representative. Although I still believe that any person in this town that has, an issue that wants to get in front of the council, comes down to the council meeting and says their piece. And, but I do think that 10 years from now, if we get the growth, to the east at Greens Patuxent and certainly to the south, as the Conti Road area starts to fill in, we'll be at 40,000 easily. So that's probably the time to address it. Today, I don't really think it's worth it. I think a tweak and get us down the road would probably be the smartest thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Oris?
Yeah, I would be open to hear any proposals from McCrary or but I think I'm kind of in line with Rick at this point that the number of changes or any wholesale changes or the rest of the group, it sounds like would cause chaos when it comes time to vote. So, but that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. So I've heard, so knowing that the council has the ability to accept or reject our recommendation, and we can tell the council that we have reviewed the 4 options, I guess I would need a motion, but I guess what I'm asking is, do we have consensus that we would like to put forward as a proposal to the public and to the mayor and city council that the sample 1, we would take off sample 1 and call this proposal existing Ward 1 plus south of Route 198 to Cherry Lane and west of Van Dusen is our proposal for bringing the numbers more in line. I'll go in reverse order. Mr. Clary, do you agree that this one we would want to put forward?
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, Mr. Wilson. Rick?
Yes, I would agree.
Roy?
I would agree with one caveat. I still want to hear what others have to say, especially from those areas that would move over to Ward 1, because I know that, the interests of those respective areas are different, and I'm not sure how they will feel going into Ward 1, but the answer your question is yes, with reservation.
Absolutely. And so I guess, so that let me be clear. If this, and Rhonda, I'm coming to you, if this becomes our consensus point, then immediately staff would then immediately change this, get the information. We would ask for communications to get this information out to those specific residents as soon as possible. As Rick said, maybe put up a board, get the information out. We would be inviting them to our next meeting to comment or to send in written comment and hear from them prior to our official vote. So what we're saying is, the reason I'm asking if we have consensus tonight, we are not voting tonight that says, this is what we've decided and let's take it to the council. What we're saying is, have we reached a consensus to put this one in front of the public to invite comment And then after we hear that, making that vote. And so Rhonda, I'm sorry, let me go to you before we finalize.
No apology needed. So, okay, so you're asking if there's consensus to send this one, just this one out, right? So I know we've gone through the other slides. We've said no. That's us saying no.
Correct.
Will those also be presented though? Because I think
The reason I'm shaking my head is those were all presented and have been online since our first meeting,
got it.
inviting comment to tonight. That's why we were so specific on the agenda to say we're inviting people to come tonight to tell us which of the 4 options they would like to see done.
Okay.
And so then we're now coming to, as a committee, making an advisory opinion, putting forward one. Now, when the public comes back to us, they can say, I don't like that, it should have looked like this, or don't make any change or go to 3. They're still open to comment to us on anything.
Okay, I guess, so not trying to make this a long conversation or discussion, but in this extremely heightened environment that we're living in from a voter's perspective, voting rights and voting issues perspective, what is the harm in maybe asking them, giving them one more opportunity, right? Because Donna McCrary said she hadn't gotten this within a 24-hour notice. I don't know if that meant she didn't open her email or she didn't know, or if it's her opinion that it wasn't posted for public consumption within 24 hours.
I guess what I'm not understanding, we are giving one more opportunity. That's why.
No, one more opportunity for all of the samples.
Oh, I don't know why we would want public input on something. Because again, the public input to us is to help us form our opinion.
Absolutely.
So those numbers that were 17,000 to 10,000, even if somebody came in and said, I like that the best, I think it goes against everything that all of us have said. Now, again,
so what I'm asking, the slides that we're looking at, samples 1 through 6, those were placed out for public consumption, correct?
Correct.
So, and we're saying, and Donna is saying she didn't see these in the 24 hours?
No, she said she didn't have
the agenda.
She couldn't schedule coming into this meeting.
Okay.
But again,
okay.
So all I'm saying is what we're bringing to the next meeting is our collective opinion, and the public can still come in and say, well, I disagree with your opinion and here's why. And then it's kind of like what we do at all of our commission meetings.
Yeah, I get that. I'm clear of what's happening. I'm just wondering what would be the downside of presenting these slides, these samples one more time. We didn't get a lot of input, and I get it. You know, we've done our part, but I'm asking what would be the harm?
It would just be 2 more meetings instead of 1. That's all. It's up to you all. Because if we wait another 2 weeks to just leave these out that were already out, then when we come together again, we won't have a resolution to vote on to push the city council, which we may or may not have even after we hear the public hearing, but we definitely won't if we leave all of these out. Okay. And so then we would come back in, I guess, April for a 4th meeting.
Because if it's the number of meetings, and you guys can tell me to stop if you want, but if it's the number of meetings, I think it's worth an extra meeting to give folks another opportunity and to understand what we're looking at, what we're considering, and what we may escalate up as a recommendation. I'm speaking from a consumer perspective. I'm a banking attorney, so I'm always thinking from a consumer perspective and disclosures and notices, and that's just the world I operate in, but we're also in a heightened environment. And so I just think I would want us to, if it's just a difference of 1 more meeting, I don't see the harm in that. I still feel that we can finish our work. We can escalate this up. We can provide recommendations in short order. we're never going to please everyone. 100% of the citizenry will not look at this, right? But I feel, I just don't see any harm in waiting or giving them one more opportunity to see this, these samples.
Okay. Roy?
I'm sorry. And I missed the first meeting and I'm like, Monday morning quarterbacking, I'm sorry, but.
Yep, I think you bring up some good points. I personally feel that, some of those samples, I think that they're clear based on our conversations that I really think we should even consider them. I understand public and they definitely can bring a different aspect, but I think when we present this, we could present this as well as the existing, just to kind of show a contrast, maybe, I don't know, because, I'm about to say consumer because you said consumer, but from a community perspective, if I'm looking at this map, I'm like, okay, nice colors, right? Got my favorite color orange in there. But if I see the existing versus what we're potentially proposing, I think that's going to open up maybe a different dialogue. And it could result, right? Worst case scenario is, somebody says, I don't like this one. You all have some more. And that's the drawback. So I kind of agree a little bit what you're saying, Rhonda. But at the same time, I do understand what Mitzi's saying also. But I think if we're going to present something, I think we should present what we're proposing as well as what we currently have, so they can see that clear. And I'm not sure if that's what's going to happen. But if we do go with this route, that both of them should be presented, in my opinion.
Rhonda, what if this is the second time that they've been presented publicly. Our first meeting was televised and all 6 of these samples were put out. It was online and this is it again. If we have reached consensus that this is the one that we as a committee, after having, looked at it twice and had our discussion, this is the one that we propose. What if we do exactly what I did with this presentation and change this one to our proposal, have the staff, again, draft the resolution, but in the public notice, we would say, here are, and Roy, I completely agree to your point. It would start with the current wards and this proposed with an explanation of the change. And then we would say, and these are the others that were considered by the committee, and you're welcome to continue to comment on. And so that in a sense can move us forward. And again, I'm with you. We can have multiple meetings, but I'm thinking that way we have kind of taken a step forward as a group, but yet the presentation to the public should say, here are the other ones that were considered and discussed. And you too may comment on those if you join us at the public hearing.
I like that, right? Because the transparency continues. Yeah, I like
that. And I'm all about that too. Yeah. Oris, how does that sound to you?
That works for me. Thank you.
Okay. Rick?
Yeah, that works for me. I do have one request. Take example, sample 1.
Okay.
If the GIS guys, when they made this, if they could take that triangle, the part that changed, the blue part of Arbery and all that, and just put striped lines through it or something to indicate that's the part that changed.
That's an excellent point. Robert, did you hear that?
I did. Do we want to do that?
I don't know if they can do that, but if they can do that, that might be helpful, because that way people can look at it, find themselves and go, oh.
Yeah, it would just be like a side note. So it would still be the same blue, but either hash marks or something. And then under the legend, it would just say change from, basically added to Ward 1.
No, and we could add that to the box up there to show what the change was. Yeah, that's fine. That's something we could definitely do.
But actually in the map, what I'm talking about, right?
Yes. Oh, definitely.
Oh, no, actually on the map, and we'll also have in the legend. Yeah.
Yeah, that way it's just easier, because if you're not intimate with where everything is, it's a little hard to pick it up. But that would be great. I don't have a problem with having another meeting. Although I do think, I get the whole voting rights business, but in my opinion, that's not what we're talking about here. This is pure just, to me, this is a pretty straightforward thing. I don't think that this changes which ward you're in or whether we have 2 wards or 3 wards changes anybody's representation. But that's
Yeah.
just my sense of it.
I agree. It's not a voting rights. We know that, right? But again, I'm speaking for the masses. And so any of these changes could trigger those types of debates and conversations and controversies. And that's something else that we're trying to steer away from. And so I just think that's my opinion. I agree with you, but I still believe we're still tinkering with the voting. And so we just need to be cautious of that and aware of that.
Yeah, Rhonda, I'm with you. My thing is anything, if somebody would tell me if we went to 3 wards that we'd get an extra 1,000 people to come out and vote, I'd be helping them draw the lines. You know what I mean? I am so disappointed that we have 30,000 people. And how many people did we have vote in the last election, which was contested?
I agree.
It's amazing to me that people can't show up for municipal elections. So.
Okay, I'm just trying to be conscious of time. Oris, let me go to you last. If I could, to make sure, I think I did not get to you on, are you okay with us going forward and incorporating Rhonda's point of naming our proposal, but also leaving all of those that we considered for others to view?
Yes.
Okay. Then committee, I will follow up with staff. Rhonda and I will do that without all the messiness of everybody on. We'll have that presentation come back out to the full committee, and then we will have them work with communications to get this information out. And Rick, I really like your idea of getting some kind of a blinking board around even if maybe a signs at each of the Arbory entrances, because there's only one way in and out of each of those neighborhoods, to let people know that this is being considered. It would affect them, their voting location, and invite them to our next meeting. I'm sorry, Brooke, can you go to our last slide, which is before, I think the one prior to this one. Nope, sorry. The last of the meeting slides. Keep going. I think it was right before, right here. Okay. Well, nope, keep going. One more. There you go. So I believe we have reached a consensus. So we'll have the staff develop a resolution for our next meeting, public hearing, and then vote on the resolution. Now, again, we may hear enough input that we don't agree with our resolution at the end of the next meeting, in which case we would go to another meeting. And there's no problems with that. We do that at Planning Commission sometimes. I don't think we identified any needs for additional information other than additional input. So if we can get a lot of communication, maybe we'll get some additional public input at the next meeting. And our next meeting date is Wednesday, March 30th at 6 p.m. And we'll get this communication and this information out ASAP. Any final comments? I'll go in reverse. Oris?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Rick?
So thank you.
Thank you. Roy?
No, but I hope you, with the communication, even sending it to their, I think they should have an HOA. I'm not sure if you all do that type of communication to ensure that, their voices are heard. So I'll make that recommendation, but thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Robert, if you've got that too, because Robert was building the lists of all of the HOAs as part of something we were doing. Right. Thank you, Robert. Rhonda?
Nope, nothing else. And Roy, great recommendation or suggestion.
Thank you. Kim, I never called on you. Did you have anything that you wanted to add? I'm so sorry.
I believe she actually had to jump off to the next meeting.
Okay. I'm glad she was able to join. Robert, anything from you?
No, I think we'll take everything that was brought in here. The meetings are, like I said, they have to be posted at least 2 days ahead of time. This one was actually posted on the calendar a week ago, but we'll put it out there more, I think, for everybody. And what we'll look at is if it is a certain affected area, I'm assuming that we'll have to send to an HOA and possibly to each of the residents actually a letter. So we'll look into that. I'll work with Kim on that to see what our next step will be.
That's wonderful. And the good news is, since it's 2 weeks and 2 days away, we do have some time. So I'll get that presentation turned back around so that can be part of that. And with that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night,
Wanda,
everybody.
enjoy your next